Hey folks, I'm Papa Boris, and this was the first game to finish of the first Champions Cup tournament for the board game leaders. My opponent was Pinkfloydist. He grabbed a bruiser. The board game arena replay I don't think it's possible to figure out what the options were. I don't know what just came out, but he took the bruiser and made a move. I decided to grab the Hermit and Cub, which seemed to make sense because that's the strongest of the characters that are here. And then out popped the Nemesis, which meant that which meant that for me, for my second draft, I was going to take the Jailer because the Protector and the Nemesis are both kind of blah. My opponent moved in with the Bruiser and grabbed the Brewmaster, which I think makes a lot of sense. That was the strongest character there. And here, as far as the tournament goes, is a little bit unhappy in my, one of my early games here. This one ended the quickest. Remember, all the board games, all the 14 games in this tournament began at the same time. So this one started at the same time as the others, but it ended the first, so this was the one that was moving along the quickest. So it was a little bit unfortunate to see like we got a little bit of a crap pick here. But I do have the Hermit and the Cub, and as you know from my strategy video, that means I think the Assassin is playable. So I grabbed the Assassin, put him on the edge of the board, and decided let's try that strategy that I did in my MVP Assassin video. My opponent also doesn't have a great pick because the Manipulator came out to show the Assassin, or to replace the Assassin. So after forming a little bit of a wall here, he grabs the Manipulator. All right, I'm not too unhappy with what has popped out here. Obviously, the Claw or the Illusionist would have been nice, but after moving some pieces around, I don't mind grabbing the Rider. So the Rider will get in nice and quick. And my opponent, after forming even more of a wall, pulls my Hermit back with the Manipulator and tucks the leader further away behind the Assassin. So we're going to get into a little bit of a slow game here as my opponent grabs the Vizier for some slipperiness. There's going to be some walls, and there's going to be some, maneuvering. I decided to just push my pieces up. I'm not doing anything super crazy here. I do stay out of the way of the Manipulator. And the Assassin, well, the thing is that this Vizier can kind of keep the Assassin at bay all the time. But I figure since I outnumber my opponent with the Cub, then I don't mind if two characters kind of square off against each other forever. Now my opponent moves up with the Manipulator, or thinks about it. Board Game Arena shows all of the undos that someone does. My opponent decides to push with the Bruiser, set the leader back to the edge of the board, put the Manipulator in the center column, and then pass it over to me just to let me decide what it is that I want to do. What's interesting is that my opponent actually didn't put the Vizier here to block the Assassin. I'm not sure if there's some kind of a trick with that, but I figure, hey, if, the plan is to, push my Assassin with the Manipulator, I'm fine with the Manipulator's turns being wasted. I charge in with the Rider. I pull up with my Hermit and Cub. I put my Jailer there, and then I kind of do this. So I've got a bit of a floating fortress here. So my thinking here was, let's cut off the enemy leader with all of my pieces on the right, and then have the Assassin being annoying by himself on the left. So I thought I was in a pretty decent position here. I was really curious to see how Pinkfloydist would handle it, and I think that his response to the situation is quite instructive. So what he decides to do here is he actually uses the Manipulator to pull back the Assassin. He then uses the Brewmaster to move the Bruiser. That means the Bruiser is away from the Jailer, and he uses the Bruiser then to push the Assassin back even further. And then he just steps up with the Vizier, slips the leader in here, so all of a sudden, he seems to be in much better shape than he was at the beginning of the turn, where he was cut off on both sides, or so I thought. Now, the Assassin's not really in position to get around to the back, and so we are looking to get into a game of walls here. So what I decided to do was I decided to swing the Rider in around the back. I wasn't sure what my second checkmaiting piece would be, but I figured I had to go for it. We get the Assassin in here, get the Hermit in, keep the Cub where it is. I keep my leader back here nice and safe. This does mean the Bruiser can, of course, push the Assassin, so maybe that wasn't the most logical play. But I figured after doing this, the Bruiser would be next to my Jailer, and then the Assassin could try slipping around the back again. My opponent zips over with the leader, which is a very brave play because it is putting him kind of close to the Assassin. Changes his mind about it, does it again, steps in with the Vizier, and then we've got this wall. So at this point, I wasn't really sure how to proceed in the best way, and I'm not sure if I did proceed in the best way. Maybe I could have just started moving in with the Assassin. That would force the leader to go back and the Vizier to step around, but then he'd have to plug the hole with another piece, and maybe I could sneak in with the Jailer. So I decided to try that. I put the Assassin there, put the Rider around the back, and then I just kind of slid everything down to keep my leader safe, and then kind of support the Assassin's push so that the Jailer could constantly stay near the Bruiser. I'm Not 100% sure that this was the correct play, because again, I thought I was in a pretty good spot here, but my opponent's maneuvering in this game is really beautiful and quite instructive. So what he does is he just moves the bruiser away from the jailer, puts the vizier here, so now the jailer is going to have a harder time harassing the bruiser, slides everything over, and now it looks like if the assassin tries to go around the bottom, my opponent can just seal the gap. And then he sort of invited and isolated my rider, who has no other support for checkmate. He then pulls the leader back here, so now it's like, how's the assassin getting over, or how's another piece getting over here? Okay, he decided to just mellow out and not put the leader all the way over here. So on my turn, the plan I came up with was, let's get the rider up to the leader at least. So now we need to get one more piece up to the enemy leader. Let's try swinging the assassin around, and let's just keep on moving this wall. I'm not 100% sure that this is the best course of action, but my thinking was that now if my opponent wants to seal off the assassin, everything has to slide down, and then maybe the hermit can poke out at the top. I think the problem with this idea, though, is evident in my opponent's turn when he simply pushes the leader back the other way. Now my assassin is miles away from the leader, and my opponent does a very curious move. Instead of pulling up the vizier and the bruiser, he leaves this hole, kind of daring me to pull a piece into it. And I decide to go for it. So I put up the hermit, I move the assassin. I think maybe I'll move the assassin back around the slow way, who knows. I keep the rider close to the leader, and then I just pass my turn. Now, I could, of course, have just moved the cub and the jailer and the assassin, but I wanted to keep the jailer next to the bruiser, so I strategically left this gap open. However, this allows my opponent to make a pretty good play. So what he decides to do here is he pushes the manipulator with the bruiser. This allows him to now use the manipulator to pull up the cub, which gives the vizier the ability to walk in and threaten my leader. And now with the manipulator over here, this is suddenly looking like a pretty dangerous situation. He then continues to keep the bruiser out here, so now it's like, well, if I want the bruiser not to be able to just shove his way in for checkmate, then the jailer has to stay here. If this weren't a jailer, by the way, there would already have been checkmate with the bruiser coming in. And of course, I wouldn't have made the turn like that, but the jailer is very important here, keeping the bruiser at bay. But now it's sort of like the bruiser is keeping my jailer locked down. So he then jumps in with his leader very aggressively to get away from this rider, and he's perfectly safe because the cub and the hermit can both touch the leader, but of course the cub can't do checkmate. So now I wasn't really sure what to do. The plan I came up with was, let's block the leader and use the cub and the hermit for that. And then let's step up with the rider just to kind of cut the leader's options down for how to get back out of here, although the leader can't go through this square but can still go up to get away from the hermit. But I thought this might be a decent amount of pressure. I am threatening checkmate here with the rider, and I thought it would be a little bit tricky for my opponent to stop it. He'd have to pull the manipulator back, and then with the manipulator back, my leader would be safe. At this point, there's a little bit of a puzzle. If you were my opponent, what move would you make here? Pause the video if you want to stop and try to figure it out. What I needed to do on my turn was move my leader. I didn't want to move my leader because then, of course, his vizier could hem me in against the wall. But I think that was the correct thing to do, because to stop checkmate at this point, my opponent could run the leader all the way back or could keep running it around. But I think that was my best course of action. As it is, I missed a checkmate. My opponent just steps aside with the manipulator, kicks his leader with his brewmaster, and then takes advantage of the fact that the cub can't deliver checkmate to just zip over with the leader, fueled by the vizier, for checkmate with him and the vizier right in the heart of enemy territory. If the hermit and cub had been switched places, that wouldn't have been possible. But as it is, Pinkfloydist completely outmaneuvered me, and that was my start to the tournament. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like and/or subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.